Hello everyone, Grandpa Ron here again. Hey, this is the third of my experimental Bible study sessions. If you have enjoyed these or you're getting something out of them, please let me know. Also, if you have suggestions about them, let me know that as well. Well, in the first session we learned about God's creation, how He created a perfect world. In section 2, we had our chapter 2 of Genesis. We had a little flashback that talked a little bit about man and his role in the perfect world. And now in chapter 3, we're going to get some devastating news, and it's going to set the stage for the rest of the entire Bible and for the state of man that we live in today. And so I'll get started, and we'll start off with Genesis chapter 3 and verse 1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, Indeed, God has said, You shall not eat from any tree of the garden. In other words, has God said this? Well, first of all, animals can't talk. But if you remember in the last chapter, Adam had named all of the animals. God had brought all the animals before him. He had named all of them. He realized he really couldn't communicate with them. Then, once he knew that he needed a helper, God created Eve, and we already studied that account. So Eve may not have known that animals couldn't talk. One evidence of this is she wasn't shocked. I mean, she didn't, oh my goodness, the serpent's talking to me. She wasn't shocked at all. So it appears she thought that was normal. So who was talking? Well, we're going to find out it was Satan talking through the serpent. Now, this chapter doesn't talk about Satan very much. It introduces this character, Satan. We kind of know who he is, but it isn't until later in the Bible that God develops where Satan came from, who Satan is, what his purposes are, all that kind of thing. But here we get this introduction right off the bat of Satan. And the woman said to the serpent, From the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat. But from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat from it or touch it, lest you die. Well, she kind of added that touch it. I don't remember reading that earlier, but so there might have been a little misunderstanding there, but we're not allowed to eat of that tree. And the serpent said to the woman, You surely shall not die. You're not going to die if you eat that. For God knows that in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Well, we'll see later that their eyes were opened, and they, just as God knows the difference between good and evil, they're going to find out. But they are not God, and they are going to pay a penalty for this. Satan didn't mention that, but God had warned them of it. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate. And she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loin coverings. So in the last chapter we saw that they were naked and it didn't, they weren't ashamed, but now, both spiritually and physically, spiritually. They could communicate with God, have fellowship with God. Now they know there's a problem, and they try to hide themselves. Yeah. Now, Adam should have known better. I mean, God had spoken directly with him. We're assuming that Adam had told Eve about this restriction because she knew about it. We don't know if God told her directly, but it appears that Adam told her. But he knew the animals couldn't talk, and he had spoken directly with God. We know that, and or received the caution directly from God. So he should have known better. He should have trusted God. But he didn't trust God. He saw there was good. He was selfish, and I'm going to ignore what God told me. Just like the child might ignore you when you say, don't stick that fork in the outlet because you're going to get hurt. I think I'll do it anyway. For whatever reason, Adam ate. And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God, among the trees of the garden. So apparently, God had manifested himself in some way, maybe the pre-incarnate Christ we'll talk about later. Throughout the Bible, there's reference to God appearing in a pre-incarnate form. But they had fellowship. And now they hear him coming and they want to hide. Okay, verse 9. Then the Lord called to the man and said to him, where are you? Well, God knew where they were. It's just like when we deal with a child and the child's hiding, Joey, come out. Where are you? Well, you know where he is. But you're calling him out. And he said, I heard the sound of thee in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself. And he said, God said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat? Well, God knew what they had done, and but he wants them to admit it. And the man said, the woman who thou gavest to me to be with me, she gave me from the tree, and I ate. So Adam tries to blame it on the woman that God had given him. But he does admit that he ate it. Then the Lord God said to the woman, what is this you have done? And the woman said, the serpent deceived me, and I ate. And she had been deceived, but she knew the warning that God had given. Adam had passed that along to her. And she basically was deceived, and instead of trusting God, she trusted the snake, Satan. And the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you more than all cattle, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. And he shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In pain you shall bring forth children, yet your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Let's talk about the serpent first. So this beautiful serpent is physically cast to the ground, changed in some way, where he's no longer the beautiful serpent he was, but is going to eat dust and be humbled the rest of his life. And on a spiritual level, Satan is going to suffer as well. And it says here that there will be enmity between your seed and her seed. All through the Bible, we're going to see that there's this constant spiritual battle between Satan and God. And God is ultimately going to win it says here, and he shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. And now we're looking thousands of years forward, but we're going to learn this down the road, and you'll remember this when we come back to it, after going through the Bible, that this is predicting what's going to happen at the cross. Christ is going to crush Satan by taking away the sins of the world that Satan had induced right here, the beginning of right here. But Satan will bruise Christ on the heel in that he will have caused him to suffer. But Christ will win. Anyway, this is just a little foreshadowing, and it just reading it right now casually, I'm sure you probably don't see that, but when you compare this with verses, chapters ahead, books ahead, all the way into the New Testament, you'll see how this becomes apparent. Apparently the woman will have more pain in childbirth if she would have to start with, but she will still desire for her husband, and the husband shall rule over you. And this theme pops up throughout the Bible. And when it talks about the husband ruling over her, it doesn't mean they're not equal. It just means they're going to have different positions. The husband will have a position, the wife will have a position with responsibilities. One's no better than the other, but positionally they're going to be different. Then to Adam he said, verse 17, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it, cursed is the ground because of you. So it was Adam's responsibility. He should have known. And the ground is going to be cursed because of Adam and his sin. And it's something we suffer with all the way today, because everybody is descended from Adam. And this same sin nature has been inherited and passed down from generation to generation. It says, cursed be the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall grow for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, because from it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So Adam is going to have to work to survive now. Going to have to work to survive. Before everything was right at hand, but now he's going to have to work to survive. Now the man called the wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living of all the living. In other words, living people. And the Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. Now if you remember in the earlier verse, it said they made fig leaves for themselves to cover themselves. They did that on their own. But now God is making garments from animal skins. God actually made them, which meant some animals had to be killed. We're going to learn later on. Again, reading this casually, you probably don't see it, but in future verses, as we go through the Bible, you're going to see that this is a foreshadowing of the sacrificial system. To cover them and their sin, some innocent animals had to die. And this is kind of a foreshadowing of that. So God killed these animals to put skins on there to cover their sin. Then the Lord said, verse 22, behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now lest he stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever, we're going to have to do something. So verse 23, therefore the Lord God sent him out from the Garden of Eden to cultivate the ground from which he was taken. So he drove the man out. And at the east of the Garden of Eden he stationed the cherubim and the flaming sword which turned every direction to guard the way to the tree of life. So we still have the garden. It's still here on earth, but it's being protected. Adam and Eve could probably see where it was, but they're outside now. And there's no way that they know of to get back into that Garden of Eden. And this seems like a real severe punishment, but in reality, in God's mercy, He is delaying the inevitable of what He had said before in His warning. If you eat of this, you shall surely die. Well, He meant physically and spiritually. Now, physically, everything starts to go downhill from there, and we're going to read about that continuously throughout the Bible down the road. And they are going to die. Now, Adam lived 900 years or so, but he died. So, where before he sinned, he would have lived forever. He would have lived forever. But now he's going to die. And in these early stages of the Bible, you're going to see that men lived hundreds of years. And later that starts to go down, go down, go down, go down until today, which we're not even close to that. But spiritually, he died also. He and Eve now don't have that open access and fellowship with God. They can't, there's a barrier now. There's a gap. And so God, in His mercy, sees that if they eat from that tree of life, they will eternally be in that condition. They won't be able to have fellowship with Him. They'll be sinful the rest of their existence. And so mercifully, God throws them out of the garden so they cannot eat the fruit of that tree of life. We're going to read about the tree of life again at the end of the Bible, but right now, God is punishing them, but He's also making it possible for Him to provide a way for them to get out of this sin condition. Quite a phenomenal book, because it sets the stage for everything that comes after. And what we're going to see is God instituted a temporary system for the nation of Israel. And again, I keep saying this, but we're going to read about this more and more down the road. He instituted a temporary system of animal sacrifices that provided for substitutionary atonement for sin. Not permanent, but a temporary. If they continue to do the sacrifices as God teaches them, He's going to delay until the only perfect sacrifice comes on the scene, and that's Jesus Christ the Lord, who is sinless and sacrifices Himself. He gives Himself up freely to pay for man's sins, and that's way down the road, thousands of years later. But God, by throwing them out of the garden and not letting them eat that tree of life, is making it possible for them to look forward to that day in the future. It's quite likely that Adam and Eve knew the necessity for these animal sacrifices, because in later chapters, we're going to find out that they and their children actually provided sacrifices to the Lord, both animal and grain sacrifices to the Lord. So we'll read about that in the near future. So if you have questions, please let me know. If this was interesting and helpful, let me know. We'll end here. This is another short one. And next time we'll go on to chapter 4, where we start seeing how the earth becomes populated. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.